I'd like to get into more of your work specifically around how the brain does work and what it does require compared to kind of when we work using our bodies, as you were referencing earlier, sort of optimizing for industrial revolution and productivity. I'd like to go deeper if we could, because I'm thinking about my own day of back-to-back meetings that have no room built into them whatsoever for any kind of like brain rest to then be able to come back online and have more creative thinking. And I know so many people obviously feel that pain, and it doesn't feel like the workplace is changing and sort of, adapting in any kind of meaningful way. So can we understand a little bit deeper about some of the brain science and how we really need to think about evolving our workplaces?
Yes, so it's absolutely true that workplaces are having difficulty in adapting, and that is because we assume. So let's again take a step back and go back to the time of the Industrial Revolution, and even a little bit before then. Some great scientists across the world, Helmholtz being the principal one, discovered the concept of energy. And once the concept of energy started being really closely looked at, we discovered the idea of inefficiency. Okay, efficiency, and hence followed by that inefficiency. And when a whole range of experiments were done, looking at the idea, the concept of efficiency by itself, and then looking at the concept of efficiency in terms of the brain, we started edging towards replicating or thinking of the brain in terms of a machine. So this all actually happened in the 19th century. And then in parallel with that, we started the Industrial Revolution. And when the Industrial Revolution happened, again, the concept of efficiency seeped through, and we started working on assembly lines. So the assembly lines formed on the basis of improving efficiency. And of course, they were brilliant. They massively increased productivity in quantitative terms, tangible products. And it was such a great model that when we then shifted to knowledge work in the 1950s, we changed what we produced, but we didn't change how we did it. So we simply assumed that the brain worked just like muscle. And in a typical sort of factory assembly line setting, what would happen is you'd start the day, you would then continue at a constant pace, at constant volume, at constant speed, until maybe around lunchtime, and then have a short break, and then do the same again until around 5 or 6 in the evening. You'd clock off. And then when we started working in offices, we followed exactly the same template. But of course, the brain, it's obvious to anyone, is very different from muscle. It doesn't perspire, it doesn't complain, it doesn't go red, it doesn't ache. But what it does do is, if you actually look inside the brain, which we're only now able to do, and do a kind of graph theory analysis, which I know 2 teams in Singapore and Australia are doing really well, then you notice that actually if you look at the functional connectivity within the brain, and we know that the functional connectivity has certain patterns which suggest maximal efficiency of data transfer within the brain. If you then take someone who does a typical kind of work that we do in the office, something that requires sustained attention, and you watch them for, let's say, 20 minutes, then 30 minutes, and then longer, you can visibly see the pathways, the functional connectivity within the brain change, and the pathways become less efficient. In other words, as the human starts feeling a little bored, or perhaps even further than that, slightly tired. But it's 11 in the morning, they can't be tired, carry on. But in fact, it's very likely that they feel this way because their brain is becoming less efficient. And the brain naturally has the desire or the tendency or the need to then change state. So we know that the brain works in different states. These different states can be measured and recognized by looking at certain patterns of brain waves in addition to the functional connectivity. And we know that as soon as a person's brain or a person grows slightly tired or bored, they kind of lapse into mind wandering. And when mind wandering happens, one of the things that we notice is an increase in alpha waves, as an example. And we're now understanding that, for instance, that alpha wave, one of the purposes of alpha waves is almost to act like a windscreen wiper. So it clears away an over-cluttered chalkboard. And if you look at a person from the outside, you can't see any of these things. They might just look slightly bored or just slightly tired, slightly sluggish. They might just grab a coffee and carry on. But actually what's happening inside the brain is now the brain is in a less optimal position to be able to do its optimal kind of work. And we know that the brain has this extraordinary repertoire. It can do very simple things and it can do really complex things. Problem solving is very complex. Making a decision between A and B based on very little is very simple. But in order to do those complex things that AI cannot do, the brain must not be in a suboptimal position. And so looking at the way the brain changes within really very short time frames of doing hard work tells us that if you have an office filled with AI, lots of LLMs, and then you have a few humans doing the work that those LLMs can't do, namely 1 + 1 or very simple quantitative work, you need those brains to be absolutely optimally positioned to be able to justify their place in the office, to take the organization forward, to create change, to use the AI as tools. But if you force the brain to work like a machine, you're limiting the brain to only behaving like a very basic level AI. So this is a really important distinction.